Okay, for question number one, I thought it was very interesting that Esther decided to marry a gentleman named George, who she only wrote letters to. I thought that they would need to meet up in person and have a social interaction before an event like this would take place. Okay, for question number two, I think the first perspective we can look at is social inequality for Esther herself and the other African Americans. For example, to be direct, Mrs. Dixon tells her that it's not easy for a colored woman in this city. And she also refers to how she cannot read in the play and how she's always comparing herself to the white women and how they have more money and power than she does individually. For the second perspective in this play, I think we can go back into males versus females. Um, this can be seen specifically in the play when George is talking down on Esther's dreams. When she said that it's half of her life savings in the book, he says, for what? For it to sit. I think this just shows that males are still perceived as higher roles in society than the females are. So for these perspectives, I think it's really showing the time period and the stereotypes that these individual groups are going. For example, the African Americans, and then a female versus male standpoint. For question three, I actually underlined the word deacon in the play. I wasn't familiar with the reference, and it refers to the minister of the church. So with that information, I could understand how George found out about Esther in the play, and then it really just related the rest of the play to that. Okay, for question four, we look at the issue of diversity, and we reference the three R's from lecture. And when looking into that, I think Lynn Nottage definitely demonstrates the stereotypes and the experience of African Americans in the play. She shows that not only through Esther, but other characters. For example, Esther is working all of her life and saving up all of her money just to have a chance of opening up a dream, and she's making a minimum wage, and she cannot read. She also has a past history of losing her family, her mom to influenza, and her dad was a slave back then, which also reinforces stereotypes. Esther, in one point of the play, also, when writing to George, says that, sure, I can tell him anything there is to know about fabric, but there hardly seems a life worthy of words. And this also just shows that she's not happy with where she is, and that she wants more in life. With that said, I think Lynn Nottage wrote the play to show the lifestyle of African Americans and being a woman at that time period. She was really just showing social inequality and even political inequality. Question five, I do think that stereotypes for African Americans still exist. We can look at the news, which I think perpetuates half of it, as the police killings today. A lot of African Americans are being shot by white officers, and that's where a lot of our troubles are happening. I think what helps solve it is that African Americans and white groups of people are coming together and helping mourn for the events that are happening. My two questions would be, what do you guys think happened to George at the end of the play, and why didn't we ever see the writings of Esther like we did George?